Welcome to the Rooted Healing podcast, where we seek to deepen our kinship with the living landscapes around us and within us. This is a space where stories heal with words that weave us closer to our wild and interrelational nature, where we explore ways to root down intimately with the land, ecosystems, communities, and practices that help us heal, reimagine, and co-create the world we remember to belong in.
It's the first time in the world that a 5-year-old can go to school and study mycology. It's the first time that a 16-year-old who's been kicked out of school or doesn't know what their next steps may be, or might have done well at school but are not academically driven, who want to then explore mushrooms. We've got options for you now. Pre-slavery, pre-colonialism, this is what we've been doing. And during this period of time, it was part of our salvation as well. And post these experiences, it could be part of our salvation and liberation.
This is a conversation with the world-renowned educator in ethnomycology and psychedelic research, Darren. Known for his shroom shop masterclasses and mushroom educational programs, he is a passionate cultivator and teacher who has been growing gourmet and medicinal mushrooms for over 13 years and has translated his home-growing experiences into a truly inspiring social enterprise, launching the UK's first accredited mycology and mushroom cultivation courses for schools and at-risk youth. Darren is a knowledgeable and dynamic speaker who is passionate about sharing his research and findings on ethnomycology and also ancient African plant medicines and their various applications. He is a member and presenter at the London Psychedelic Society and a Breaking Convention Committee member, and speaks at numerous gatherings and events around the world, sharing his research on psychedelics and how they can help support humanity in the here and now. He is also an organic horticulturist and a permaculture tutor who supports schools, businesses, and so-called hard-to-reach communities around the world to create holistic and sustainable working systems. Based between Britain and the Caribbean, his work aims to inform and empower individuals from diverse backgrounds to cope with social challenges and contribute to community development, as well as self-improvement in an innovative, creative, culturally aware style. To accompany this episode, Darren has gifted a generous discount to our Patreon community for his talks and workshops. Head to patreon.com/rootedhealing to get your discount and support the show. Darren's work is a beautiful example of an ecological niche that we so often talk about on our long course Deep on Your Roots. A mythopoetic calling that, for him, answered the question very alive for us at Rooted Healing. How do we heal uprooted selves and societies amidst unravelling modernity? Deracinated, uprooted, displaced, exiled, lost. These are common underlying experiences of the modern human. We are in turbulent times, both individually and collectively. The Anthropocene is collapsing as we realise how entangled our lives are with one another and beyond into the more than human world. Our year-long slow study, Deepen Your Roots, will provide you with a map and a compass to navigate this threshold moment. It is a collective wayfinding that bridges inner and outer worlds through animistic eyes and stirs us to listen deeply to what is being asked of us at this time. Core elements of this slow study include deep ecology, the work that reconnects from Joanna Macy, bioregionalism, which is really connecting with your locality, the land around you, animism, and the cultivating or tending to your ecological niche or mythopoetic calling. The call is communal. you can join a vibrant collective of rooted ones who are ready to embody the great turning. So I hope you enjoy Darren's stories and insights and energy and find nourishment from this conversation.
Okay, so my name by way of social media and, the world that observes me, I guess, is Darren the Baron. But my birth name is Darren Springer. So that's what my homies who really know me from the ground and up know me as, Springer. My name, Springer, is actually, it's ironic. I was looking into it yesterday again, because it's a German name, Germanic name, also a Jewish name. And I was always curious to know, how the hell did I end up with this name? Where's it from? Who's it connected to? And all the rest of it. And my family being from Barbados, that's where that name comes from in my lineage. I wondered, who were those Germans or those Jews or those English people that were in Barbados and basically had some African people enslaved and gave them this name. And then I found out yesterday with some research I was doing about Namibia that there's a big German influence there based upon the colonizing of that landscape, as well as those who caused the genocide in that land in the early around 1908, I believe, correct? And so, yeah, my name has some depth to, just still out here trying to work out who I am, what I'm doing, what's the purpose of life and all that good stuff. So, yeah, my names and places and spaces play a big part in me getting in the here and now, the landscape that I'm currently in, and that I'm encouraging people to be in and join me if they're not already there, is that they are mushrooms having a human experience. I say that again, that we are all mushrooms having a human experience and free times because it's magical. We are mushrooms having a human experience. That's what I'm out here doing. That's the landscape. And if I was to call in something, a being, a spirit, I would call in my ancestor, Kalindi Ii. He is one of the big reasons why I do what I do in the here and now. A big inspiration, teacher, guide, mentor, friend, father figure, played many roles in my life. He was an advocate for mushrooms, psilocybin, and psychedelic voyaging for decades, and wasn't well necessarily acknowledged or received until, the last handful of years that he was here in the physical realm. He made a transition just over 4 years ago. But when I start my workshop or presentations, I always give him a shout out. So I guess that's what we'll be doing here on the podcast today, is giving him a shout out. Kalindi Ii. Ashe.
Thank you. Yeah, your sort of mythopoetic becoming really fascinates me, and I love your story, which I feel began in the literal compost in many ways, and you're drawing towards growing food. I'd love to just hear you speak through your journey and really give this time and space if you feel called.
Yeah, that's I don't know if we've got enough time for all of that, Veronica, in all honesty. Because the essence of it all, people who are close to home, in my circle know that, I was born with this interest, with these curiosities, as young as I can personally remember. I was in nursery asking a lot of questions that I wasn't getting answers to or didn't resonate with me, the answers that I was getting, things like I went to all my education, nursery, primary school and secondary school was pretty much like in Roman Catholic environments. I went to Oranges and Lemon Nursery in Shoreditch, which is the church nursery. I went to St. Joseph's in Holborn. I went to St. Richard's of Chichester in Camden secondary school. So all of those influences coming from education sparked my curiosity. I'll just say sparked my curiosity as to how the hell did these people know this stuff that they was teaching me that didn't feel right, that didn't resonate with me. I had loads of questions and I was asking questions. And because of my question asking, I was considered in some cases a bright student, in other cases a troublesome student. And as early as I can remember, I was like, you're giving me colors, felt tips or pencils to color in the nativity play, as we're entering that Christmas season now, and I'm like, I've got, I don't have the right colors, like the right colors out here for me to paint in these characters as you're telling me, or as my spirit says, they should be coloured in. And if you're saying, that these characters came from these particular places and spaces, as I've done my little bit of research at that time, they didn't look like this. They didn't dress like this. Like, as a young child, I could find it in encyclopedias. I was before Google and stuff. I was into encyclopedias, so you could just do a little bit of research and you could find out, like, just for me at least, it didn't all add up. So with that said, I got to a point in time in my life where, after being told by my mum, teachers, and people around me that certain information you can't find out, or we can't prove it. I was inspired to just start doing my own research, like as early as I can remember. But as my mid to late teens, I've really dived in just looking into what we would call knowledge of self. Who am I? Where am I from? What is the purpose of life? The grand questions that people ask, as well as those little questions that I think people ask or should be asking if they haven't been asking, for us to get a better understanding of where we're at. So that's like always been part of my makeup, in being curious and asking those questions. And, if we tie it into the compost specifically, for me, the compost is a shit. I've always been interested in shit, always got into shit, I always started shit. So when it came to learning about compost through a journey that was sparked, ironically, I'm in Barbados at the moment as we speak. It was really kick-started officially when I had my first trip to Barbados, which is around 22 years ago now. It was the first time I came to Barbados, where my family's from, as I mentioned. And to cut a long story short, I got the nature bug, the cultivation bug. I was reconnected with it all because I was a green kid as a child growing up. We loved going into the forest, breaking down trees, getting branches and whacking each other with it, playing, sword fights, you name it. But being in the forest, we loved it, setting fires, it was that kind of thing. But at the same time, not really understanding, those principles that nature offers in teaching and sharing, and coming to Barbados and reconnecting with it, my childlike self, as well as identifying that all my family were agriculturalists and farmers and knew how to grow food and stuff like that, from the smallest members, of my family were like 4 or 5 years old, to my great grandmother, who was like the elder, the matriarch of the family. And like everybody knew about food and soil and growing plants and feeding themselves and what plant was what and this, that, and the other. And it was the first time in my life I was seeing banana trees and mango trees and coconuts. I'd seen them in Tesco's and Sainsbury's before, but not in real life in this third dimension. So I was taken aback by it, or blown by it, or, inspired by it, or to go back to the UK and reconnect with with the soil there. Coming from East London, I come from Epping Forest. So that was what it was all about, just connecting and reconnecting with it all.
Can you share your little anecdote about the little boy who wanted to show you his patch of land?
Yeah, man, because he's a big man now. I'm saying, like, he's about to be 30 soon. So, but yeah, he was my cousin. Yeah, man, he was like, so I'm there, fascinated by it all. I remember one day I was like, yo, man, like, how comes he knew about the trees and plants. I'm like, how you know about all of this? And he's like, yo, man, let me take you to my land. I can show you my land. And I was like, land? Like, kid, you're like 4 or 5 years old. Like, what land do you have? And he took me to his land the next day. And even that story there, when he was just like, yo, man, I was like, what time? I was all this whole revelation that I've got, but I was like, what time tomorrow? And it's like, what do you mean what time, innit? Like, when the sun gets up, that time. It's just like, there is no specific time. It's just like when things happen. And I got up the next day when the sun got up and when everything else got up, the chickens, the roosters, pigs, life just got up, and they're like, oh yeah, this is the time to get up, isn't it? And we went to his land, and he had no more than, more like a square meter worth of land. But in his land, he was growing food. I can't remember exactly what it was at the time, but it would have been like callaloo, spinach, lettuce, some green food. And he knew where locally, as I said, where the guineps were, also known as ackee here on the island, not Jamaican ackee, but that's another subject. But yeah, the guineps, he knew the stuff. I was like, man, it was like, if you know this stuff, I should know this stuff. And I didn't know this stuff. And that was what one of the key inspirations for me coming back to London, and be like, let me find out what's going on in my forest, in my jungle, which was Epping Forest, and my community. And that community was like right on the edge of Epping Forest, ironically, which was organically. And that was kind of like, I bumped into one of the organisers at that time, and in Walthamstow Market. It's a Sunday farmers market. I was down in the farmers market because I came back. I was I had a garden for the first time in my life. Look, I'm in my 30s. I grew up in the estates and block of flats and stuff. So the most I had was a balcony. So had the family house, got a garden. I want to grow food for my family, for my daughter at that time, and then to be my daughters. And that's why I went down the market. I wanted to grow strawberries. So I was looking for these strawberry seeds at that time, not knowing that I didn't need seed. I needed, some cuttings and slips and all this, because I wanted to grow strawberries and sweet potato. That was my goal. I want to grow strawberries and sweet potatoes. And I hooked up with the guys at Organically who were at the farmers market, and they invited me down to come to their volunteer. They had an open day. And it was like, come down to the open day, learn more about it. I went down to the open day. I was blown by it all. They had this 12-acre site, doing amazing work there. I signed up as a volunteer immediately. A few weeks later, I signed up to do my level 1 in organic food growing. 3 months later, after the course, I done my level 2, immediately signed up and done my level 2, done my introductory to permaculture. Yeah, and that was just the beginning, done my full design, program. And yeah, just got signed up for any and everything that was like food related, horticulture related, reconnecting me with nature, on a practical level. And then in principle, I took those principles back to Barbados a little bit later, and they were just laughing at me. They was like, haha, you went and like studied stuff. It was like, yeah, you didn't need to do all of that, man. Because, you can just spit in the ground and food grows here, man. That's all you got to do. You just got to spit in the ground and what you ate yesterday grows.
Or shit in the ground.
Yeah, there you go, man. So, but to answer your question and to wrap it up, like you mentioned about the compost, it was because during that time of doing my level 1, I fell in love with composting, and then moving forward on my level 2 on my soil science unit, I fell in love with the soil. Yeah, just the whole thing about it, everything about composting the soil was magical to me. And I found that the magic behind composting and the magic behind soil was this thing called mycelium. And I was like, mycelium, what? And they're like, yeah, mycelium. It's, like the network where, mushrooms that they grow from. Like, I know about mushrooms because I'm into mushrooms for different reasons. But, at the same time, like, I didn't know that this network is as important as it is. And it keeps everything together, holds it and hugs it and embraces it and keeps everything that's ever coming from the soil connected and flowing, all those nutrients, all those plants, all those bioorganisms that are dependent upon the soil and work within the soil to make all the other things that come out of the soil work. I'm like, yeah, I need to know more about this mycelium. And that was like the beginning era of like the official reconnecting with the soil, composting and mycelium.
Yeah.
About 22 years ago.
Yeah, you say you were into other mushrooms.
Yeah, so for a nutshell, like most people here who I'm having a conversation with in Barbados because we're doing the work out here, when I thought about mushrooms were my favorite pizza topping and the thing that my mum put in spaghetti bolognese. When I was in my early teens, being in school, it was these magic mushrooms that those guys that, my schoolmates were in class doing. Yeah, the white boys that I went to school with were into. Me and my friends, for the most part, were into having a bit of smoke here and there, having a little drink here and there. That was our thing. But this whole magic mushroom thing, and not just magic mushrooms, there was other things that they were talking about. So with my lens at that time, it's like, well, these guys are just druggies, innit? Like we have a little smoke, a little puff every now and then with them. But on the weekends when they're going off doing these pills or these mushrooms and going out to Hampstead Heath, hugging trees, dancing with aliens or whatever else it was they were talking about, I just felt sorry for them and thought they were doing the wrong thing, obviously. And maybe they were, who knows? I'm not saying that they may not have been the best entry point for me at that time, but with that said, like I've come to realize that they were privy to stuff that I wasn't privy to. And that was, based upon, cultural references and stuff like that, just where I was at, who I was with, who I was around, how I was raised and, how we saw things. And, obviously people saw things slightly different and they were exploring those things from an earlier age. So for me, I had like different routes into mushrooms, so for me, it was for the most part adulthood where I started exploring, psilocybin mushrooms specifically, and other plant technologies for, their usage in, creating altered states of consciousness, communicating with ancestors, that was my entry point into learning about these technologies. But I was privy to them at earlier ages through different means. And my mushroom experience starts with really that deep relationship was with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was like my relationship with that cartoon and pizzas and mushrooms and me wanting mushrooms on pizzas and people saying, you don't put mushrooms on pizzas. And I just didn't get it. I didn't understand how people didn't like mushrooms and wouldn't want them on pizzas, especially with sweet corn on pineapple. And people are like, you don't put sweet corn on pineapple or mushrooms on pizzas. And I became a defender of mushrooms and pineapple. And like, I'm still a defender of mushrooms and pineapple overall, but especially on pizzas.
I want to go more into the general stigma around mushrooms and psychedelics that you're in conversation with people in Jamaica and Barbados about as well a bit later. But to come back to organically and you being there and basically it becoming a second home for you. I know that you sometimes had your children running around and they got bored. How did this spark basically you falling into, so to speak, really quite an incredible social change project?
Well, yeah, man, as I mentioned, that journey started, officially as far as studying while I was at Organically. And for those who are not familiar, Organically is a food growing project initiative, a workers' cooperative. They're based in Waltham Forest, in Chingford, right at the edge of Epping Forest. And, as I said, I went there to do my studying, but at the same time, my children were homeschooled. So during the time I was going there to study, my children were joining me and studying too. Not on that 12-acre site, which was a safe space. They had the opportunity to just roam and venture around and learn and study just like I was. And during that time, one of my daughters was like, we go there like 2-3 times a week. That, you're on a course, we're doing the volunteering. It's getting a bit boring. There's nothing really else to do. And the stuff that you adults are doing seems to be really fun. Like they don't have stuff for us. And at that time, we say to this day, we joke around saying there was something in the water, man, because at that time, I feel like, well, one, I was like, I think my children were the only young children of that time really being up there on the site as active and, as often as they were. But it didn't take but a few years before like everybody was having children. And it seemed like, there was more reasoning as to why we needed to have activities for young people and children. But before then, it was requested like if I would help them develop or support them on this kind of young people's initiative that they was developing. They got some funding to do a young people's program. And they invited me because, again, my background outside of horticulture was, working in the community. At that time, for at least 10 plus years, I've been working in the community using creative arts, music, filmmaking, creative arts in general, working with young people, creating tangible alternatives for them, and, trying to get them to do the right thing. And during that time when they mentioned they was doing this young people's program with, with food growing, and because of my experience, is like if we could do this kind of collaboration thing. And that was like how I got involved officially from not studying as into being, being a member, in the community. And, they had challenges, doing the outreach work. So it was like, can you help us develop the outreach program, the marketing and stuff like that. And then, from there, it was like, would you be interested in helping us deliver the program? And, and it was like, sure. And, I started basically learning what I was learning on the job by way of studying my level 2 at that time. And then a few weeks later, I was delivering it to like a group of young people. And, that was like a pilot program that was initiated. And I really got into it. I guess the students liked it. I liked it. Organically liked it. It's like, we need to be doing more of this. And down the line, it got back to, people in powerful places within the borough, in education and so forth. And they was like, we're hearing about you. We're hearing what's going on. And we think we need more of this. And we developed curriculums and more outreach programs and after school clubs. And that was just like the beginning of me spending like nearly 10 years there, just like putting in work, and just spreading the spores. And, it came from, that I used to say, a lot of the young people I work with were, what they call hard to reach or at-risk young people. And I know the reason why I was good at my role is because I was one of those young people, man. Like, I may not have got into as much trouble as these young people have got into, but I came from the same places and spaces. I'm familiar with what the distractions were. I understood why they wanted to do what they wanted to do because they were smart. They was like, we don't want to fall for the okie doke. We've seen what's happened to our parents. They do this 9-to-5 thing. Doesn't add up. The maths are not mathing. It makes sense that I do this hustle, make some quick dough, and I don't have to spend my whole lifetime, with the system on my back, breaking my back, serving a system that doesn't serve me. Like they're smart enough to work that one out. And they're like, but they may not have been smart enough to find out a tangible alternative to that doesn't get them in trouble. Because the offerings that they're normally offered is like, just sell some drugs in it, quick dough. Like you can make the same kind of dough your parents make in a week that they make in a month. Like, if you're doing the maths, that's good maths, like, but with that said, there's challenges that come along with that, and do those challenges weigh up? And now those are the conversations that I used to have with them. And my goal was creating tangible alternatives. So we would go from selling weed bags to salad bags. We use the same premise, the same hustle, the same grind as we would be selling weed or any other substances that they were selling that were illegal. And let's sell lettuce. Let's bag up kilos of salad and hit up every corner, every block, every restaurant, every cafe, every hotel, any and everybody who eats food that might be interested in your product. Let's hit them up with it, because not everybody smokes weed, but everybody eats food. And that was, how we began doing what we're doing. And yeah, man, that just became a thing. And, a popular workshop that I'd done with them, it's called Money Grows on Trees, and how, like our parents might have told us otherwise, but I'm here to teach you that money does grow on trees, literally. It doesn't anymore because it's plastic money. Money's been with plastic money that time. But when it was paper money, it's paper, And although, we've got growing techniques, that you might be familiar with, like cut and come again, when you just harvest some of the leaves and then a few days later, more leaves grow. And if you take those leaves, you can sell those leaves. And if you take those leaves and put them in a little baggie, like a weed bag, but you got a bigger bag, which is now a salad bag, you can then sell those leaves and generate an income. Then you can take those same leaves out of a bag and put them in a brown box. When you put them in a brown box and put some vinaigrette or olive oil on top of it, you've now got a salad box. And that it increases the value of these leaves. And, we'll just go into the whole hustling of leaves. But before they learn how to hustle these leaves, they've got to learn about the seed. They've got to learn about the soil, the compost and all that, so they can get to making this money. But we're going to make this money, fellas. And that was like how we used to do it, man. So you should just dangle the money in front of them. That was the carrot, because they were trying to hustle and make money. So I had to give them a tangible alternative. And that alternative was working with the soil. That's the same place where the weed plants that you're interested in growing come from as well. So it makes sense. You learn it. It's transferable skills.
I love that so much, because I think so often it's this sort of romanticized thing that privileged people can do on the side, like get an allotment or have a nice big garden or, a hobby farm. But actually it's like, this is what nourishes us as human beings, and to grow things and to grow things well should be an incredibly valued thing. And this reminds me of what you're bringing to Jamaica and Barbados, with making it economically transformational, hopefully as well, bringing the mushrooms back to the people, especially with the nuance of these very high price mushroom retreats that happen, and the lack of integration with the local life and people. And so I'd love to hear you speak to your work there.
So, in Jamaica, currently in Barbados, so we could just focus on here right now, but it crosses over into many of the islands where they actually refer to mushrooms as duppy umbrella, duppy parasol. And what does that mean? Like, duppy is spirit or ghost, it's like the umbrellas that the ghosts hang under. Or, there's some negative narratives, around mushrooms. Mushrooms are bad. Mushrooms are poisonous. Mushrooms are toxic. Same kind of things we hear in the UK and around the world, unless you're, a fungophile, then it's all good. But if you've got mycophobia, then you're going to be talking the same talk. And the narratives might change slightly, but the same thing, So here they're duppy umbrella, they grow on dead things. So, it can't give life if it grows on dead things, like there's a lack of education. So that's what I do, man. I bring education to be like, no, that's not the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. They might be duppy umbrella. Like, if we find out what duppy umbrella means and what it's associated with, that ties in with maybe like when you take these mushrooms, you might see duppies, you might see spirits, you might see ancestors. Like, yeah, there's some truth to that. So, but is that bad? Is that negative? Maybe if because of the narratives here have been shaped through colonialism, have been shaped through, religions that were enforced on the people. That's where some of these narratives come. But when you tap into the indigenous people of these lands, they're aware that, fungi play a big part in the soil. If you're into agriculture, that fungi plays a big part in the soil. So it was just like bringing and joining all of those dots. So what my goal and mission has been is, before anything, I'm not even trying to get people to eat mushrooms, is just educating people what mushrooms are. Mushrooms are the fruiting body of a fungus. This fungus, has different elements. The mycelium network is what you find in the soil that connects 90% of these trees and plants, that gives them their nutrients in exchange for sugars, carbon and so forth. And it plays a part in what we could say is the climate crisis. It plays a part in the food that we eat. It plays a part in creating habitats for biodiversity, butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. Is like, oh, yeah, we didn't know that. We just thought mushrooms are the things that are on pizza that get you high or deadly, poisonous, toxic, and all the rest of it. So I'm just out here spreading the spores, man, just spreading the good news of mushrooms.
Mm. Duppy umbrella. Yeah, I was trying to remember that name when I was thinking about this interview, because it comes into that age-old conflict between monotheism and, colonial religion, and the earlier animistic beliefs and more indigenous perspectives. And I'm curious what has come through for you when you engage with these altered states with the mushrooms. How have they shaped your belief system?
Well, ironically, for me, as I said, I was born with this interest and curiosity. So what mushrooms actually done for me when I started taking psilocybin mushrooms, it just reaffirmed. It was like, yeah, man, you've been right all the time. Not right as in you know it all, but right in the sense of it was good that you was questioning this stuff. Because there's more to it than this. And the pathways that I was on, what psilocybin done was like, these are the reasons why you was reading these books, watching these DVDs, and well, before DVDs, TDK tapes and VHSs, up from that era. Like you were into all of this because you were seeking this information that, you can now access by way of, the psilocybin technology. But it was in the books, it was in the movies, it was in the things that you were watching and reading and soaking up. And I was able to kind of extract and dissect, what was relevant for me. And I basically do the same with mushrooms. It presents things and you've got to unpack, download, unpack it, dissect it and make sense of it all, integrate it all and all of that. So that's what mushrooms do. I wouldn't say it shaped my beliefs in any way. It just presents things to me. And I'm still down here like everybody else, just working it out, like just trying to make sense of it all. And I guess in some areas, I may have a better grasp of things than others. And in other areas, other people have got a better grasp on things than I have. And then you hook up with people that are on their path, and then you cross-pollinate or cross-sporulate ideas and notions. And then you're just still out here like everybody else trying to work it out. So, for me, it's a matter of not having belief systems. That's all BS. That's a belief system. It's all about knowing. And how do you know? You know through direct experience, through your own personal experiences that give you testimonies of, what things are, what it is for you. Like your own reference point, your own compass. So, what I believe, no one else has to believe. If I believe, that I'm Spider-Man, which I was when I was a child, that's all I wanted to be, was Spider-Man. I knew that as I believed it more and more and more, I actually became Spider-Man. When I was in my bedroom playing around at 5, 6, 7 years old, and my mum saying, "Come on, Darren, your dinner's ready," or whatever it is, she had to break me out of being Spider-Man. It wasn't me trying to be Spider-Man. I was Spider-Man. So this is an experience that people experience with me. That's just like, you're just playing, innit? That's just your imagination. Oh, that's just the dream. Like these things are understood that those things are like really real. Like dreams are really real. Your imagination is really real. And the more you know that those things are real, the more that you don't believe and And that's like what knowledge of self is all about. And that's what I'm all about. So I try not to believe too much. Like I'm about knowing. And that's why I dive in and have, like, if I don't know, if I've got to believe, what can I do to know? What do I need to do to know? And I know that you don't know everything. The mushrooms have pulled me up several times and given me a kick up the arse and be like, you're out here trying to work it out still. Like what you're trying to know, like you're trying to know the unknown. It's called the unknown because it's unknown. Like stop being an arsehole. Stop trying to be, a human, like with this brain thing, and like just let it be. And so yeah, there's lots to it that, as far as believing and knowing. And for me, what it's all about is, just experiencing. And through your own experiences, you could move from a belief into knowing. And that's what it's all about. And mushrooms play a big part. Yeah, play a big part in me being in that place.
I love your t-shirts that say, you are a mushroom having a human experience, partly because when I have sat with mushrooms, there's been a few occasions where I feel much less in my own process, what has often been psychologized about psychedelic use is, it's all therapeutic and growth of the self. But actually, I've been much more spending some time feeling myself almost in a kind of mushroom consciousness, being like, wow, this is cool being a human, and feeling what it is to walk upon the earth and to have this human experience. And it's something that has come up in a few other occasions from ceremonial spaces. And so I feel like I've had this very visceral sense of what it feels like to be a mushroom having a human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious what that means for you, and why that has become something you love to honor and say and share.
But if you ask me bluntly, man, I'll give it to you bluntly, is because it is. It is what it is. It's like people always say, oh, it's a cool t-shirt that you got. I'm like, no, this is a way of life for me. This is just like what it is, like on so many levels and layers. And, we can have fun with it. There's a scientific element to it. There's a spiritual element to it, different components as to why I've come to this understanding. But just like you, it was through experience. It's like if people take mushrooms and you have that experience of being like, oh shit, I'm a mushroom. And or you've allowed the mushroom to invoke, itself within inside of you, where it takes over you. It, inoculates and colonizes you and uses you as a substrate. That's when oh shit, I'm just a mushroom, innit, out here having a human experience, and when you dose up, it might heighten that experience, but that is the case nonetheless, and if we come from the premise of, we come from the soil, we go back to the soil, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, those things, our physical elements to us, is, these elements here, and mushrooms play a big part. And we know they're the soil creators. That's what I'm saying. They created the soil as we know it, and facilitate and hold space within the soil. So this big party can take place in the soil. And, humans are connected to this. So our physical makeup is, a micro version of the macro earth that has been inoculated by the spores. And we have come out of it, have been colonized by the same material, the same matter, the same material, and it makes us function, in many different ways. And there's research going out there that looks, how our central nervous system and the mycelium network look and function and operate very similar. I don't want to get into all the mumbo jumbo or the science. I'll just get into my own experiences, man. This is what I experience. And I meet people say, yeah, man, I felt the same. And it's like, yeah, man, like this is what it is then.
Yeah.
And if you eat mushrooms, like, it's too. So like I said, I don't want to bore you with the mumbo jumbo stuff. A lot of people hit me up and say, oh, you're talking all that alien stuff and mushrooms started here on planet Earth. And this is the way that modern science breaks it down. And this is what you say modern science doesn't approve of. And I'm like, I don't really care about modern science, in all honesty. Like for me, modern science is just catching up with mythology. It's just catching up with the old traditions of old. And like, I'm more into that. And like, that's where I get some of these notions from. But science does complement a lot of these things. And science is also saying, well, we might not be able to prove what you're saying, Darren, but we can't disprove it. It can't be disproven. This is like where we're at. And it's like, then what does that come down to? You've now got to believe in something. But because I've had experiences, I know certain things through my own experiences. I'm not telling anybody else that you need to believe or you need to know. That's up for you to decide if you want to believe or if you want to know. And I guess you're going to have to do the same thing. Get your hands dirty in the soil, eat mushrooms, explore them and build that relationship with them and see if they share and impart what they shared and imparted with me, with you too. Yeah. Or am I just this crazy guy walking around telling people their mushrooms having a human experience? I don't mind.
You're educating a lot about psychedelics in Africa. You're bringing mushrooms back to the people in Barbados and Jamaica and the islands. And I know you've been doing this huge mycology project looking at the mushroom species, because there's been like zero research done. I remember you saying that in your talk. I mean, maybe one mention in some ridiculous, like in the 40s or something.
Islands, returning to the islands and, and being faced with duppy umbrella narratives and deadly, poisonic, toxic and all the rest of it. No problem, man. I'm used to all of that, like as I always say, I'm always out here as an ambassador. I always say like I'm like a solicitor, a lawyer on behalf of the mushrooms wherever I go, because they always get a bad rap. But as I said, bringing education wherever I do, I thought that was always important. So with that said, it has definitely been received well, even more so than the, people may have thought, even on the island who I engage and like, well, I'm into it, but I don't know if the masses will be into it. And I'm like, well, we don't need the masses right at this stage. We just need a handful, and those handful of each one teach one. And that's how, how this thing grows. But with that said, I delivered a retreat out here in Barbados, which was like a mushroom wellness retreat. So we had people from all over the world, primarily Europe, America. We had folks from Australia, Ireland. Yeah. So we had folks from all over. And then, but we also engaged local people. So they had the opportunity to come, and be a part of the experience. It was 6 days of, mushroom wellness. So they learned about mushrooms, how to cultivate mushrooms, how to turn mushrooms into medicine, cultivate mushrooms to grow your food, cultivate mushrooms to sort out your mental health, whatever it may be. Like, you grow mushrooms and you eat mushrooms. Everybody understands my philosophy now. Grow mushrooms, eat mushrooms. That's what Kalindi taught me. So I teach people how to grow mushrooms so then you can eat mushrooms. So that's what I was teaching in these workshops. But with that said, before that, I came to the island just to do some recceing and research and trying to understand what fungi grow on the island, what native species are here. And it's a really deep story, man. I don't know if we've got time for all of it, but Barbados is one of the islands that basically got cleaned, totally decimated, and became a blank canvas after those who came from Africa were enslaved and the colonizers came here and they just turned it into sugarcane fields. There's not a tree here that is older than like 300 to 400 years old. Yeah, we don't have old growth. Like, we don't have, on some of the other islands, they got those 1,000-year-old trees and stuff, but Barbados was cleaned into a blank canvas. So and then post that, then I said, like, there was one main crop, which was sugarcane. It was a monoculture. So a lot of soil currently still needs to be rebuilt. So I was looking into all of this type of stuff, from my, my nerdy science head, like what's been going on, what's the lay of the land, what mushrooms grow here. And I come to find out that I had to come full circle back to the UK because there was no data here. As you mentioned, there was, when I found out, I didn't find out there was a document or a book on Barbados's mushrooms from the 1940s, and it wasn't available in Barbados. I had to go to basically the British Library. Actually, it was the history, Natural History Museum library, because I was in the British Library, but then it was because of COVID, the machine system went down or something. It felt like I wasn't going to be able to get my hands on this book. And then I had to order it from the British Library. So it weren't there. Then I went to the Natural History Museum library, and then the guy came out with gloves on, unpacked it in this plastic case. It was like this little pamphlet. It's this little pamphlet, yeah, of from the 1940s. And it was basically looking at primarily parasitic fungi and how they affect crops and stuff. So there was little to no information about fungi, especially mushrooms, as far as fruiting bodies on the island. And that was like, man, there's a lot that needs to be done. And me, I'm not a mushroom idea. Like, I can grow mushrooms, talk a lot of shit about mushrooms, but when it comes to mushroom ideaing and foraging, I know there's people out there that do a better job than me. So I reached out to some of those people that do a better job than me and say, hey man, this is what I'm doing, and they're like, we see what you're doing. If you ever need any help or support, we can possibly help you depending on if it aligns. And when that time came around, when I was like, I'm going to put the call out, I put the call out and it aligned. And I was honored to have, you mentioned the All Things Fungi Festival. I had Max Moody, one of the co-founders of the All Things Fungi Festival. His partner, Annabelle, came through. Chris and Sam from Mycopunks, the founders there. And then Tom and his partner, Elle, from Bristol Fungarium. They were all at the All Things Fungi Festival. And I've worked with them in different capacities over the years as well. So they've always been supportive in different ways. And it was like, yo, man, we see in here what you're trying to do over there. Let's do it. And they left, literally, Max left like 24 hours ago, or was it 2 days ago? They've been there for the last 2 weeks. So we was here. I've shared all that with you to say that we've been surveying the land from top to bottom, looking at different fungi that we can find in the island. Max is up, is an expert at microfungi. So we're looking at all the microorganisms, microfungi, to obviously some of the obvious fruiting bodies that we found or that we would have expected to see here. Ones that we expected, that we've seen, ones that we expected that we haven't seen, ones that we didn't expect that we've seen. So yeah, man, it's just been an amazing 2 weeks working out with these guys, just surveying the island. We made over, I think, just under 200 observations of different fungi, to go from pretty much 0 to 200 in 2 weeks. And everybody's keen to come back and continue to work. That's what we're doing, man. So, we've been looking at, as I said, mushrooms that are good for the soil. We found a couple mycorrhizal fungi, not many that have that relationship with the soil and particular trees. But what's really interesting is some of them are like one of ones. We might be familiar with the genus, but this particular species we're not familiar with. And, the substrates and the forms of what they're growing out of and the colors that they are all unique and bespoke to Barbados at this time. So it was just really exciting times to be, doing this work, having fun out in the jungles, man. I was in the jungles, literally, stomping through, rainforest when it's raining, heavy rains and storms as well. We've been through it all, but yeah, it's just been a fun journey, and just starting to get that data and information together so we can find out what's going on in the island and then take our next steps. And whatever the next steps will be, we're going to co-create that with the community and those folks who've got those expertise.
It's so inspiring. Yeah, I know that there's also with that a call out to for funding to come into this and for all of the work you're doing. And there's this real sense of, I mean, this is the future. It's incredible that there isn't an entire university degree in mycology yet. It's just incredible. And I know that you've been paving the way in just being able to teach this to people and taking these curriculum to schools is incredible. So I've recently written a module about sky language on our Deepen Your Roots course, and there was something that really stuck with me that you shared in your talk around psilocybin being used as an ally in the wayfinding in the underground rail network.
Well, yeah, man. There's even being here in Barbados, you find that there's a handful of traditions that have been, are still maintained to this day and part of, the customs and traditions and narratives of the indigenous people, as well as those who are enslaved that have got a use with fungi and other plant technology, psychoactives. The Arawaks or the Tainos of this land, as well as those who are enslaved, brought with them the understanding, brought with them in some cases seeds that would support them in navigating this experience. Because remember, this experience of slavery took place over 400 to 500 years period, depending on different countries and different landscapes. So after a while, when you know what's going on, you can prepare yourself slightly better. So it'd be like, okay, so what they discovered was that when they were leaving Africa, the women and the men would hide seeds in their hair, so that they could then procreate these plants for food as well as medicine in the lands that they were going to arrive to. So utilizing psychoactives has been a part of that, because the enslaved who also connected with the indigenous people who were also being wiped out at that time, they had similar systems, very similar systems. So there's an understanding of what was going on, and an understanding that we would need to cross-sporulate or cross-pollinate some of our technologies, as far as plants. So being able to navigate the terrains where, for example, say there's no light. We know that when it comes to microdosing, for example, it heightens your senses. You see clearer, sharper, these kind of things. It heightens your senses. We were utilizing them for these purposes, as well as like for mental, physical and mental help and support. There's, medical usages of plants and technologies, because you've got so navigating the terrain, seeing where you're at, mapping out the stars, getting from point A to point B. What these technologies have been used for. But on the flip side, there's mothers who are using this. It was deep, man. It was in the botanic gardens, and they was breaking down how some of these seeds, the women would use them to invoke abortions, because they didn't want their children to be born into slavery. So they knew the certain plants, the toxins, that at certain dosages, how it would affect their body. And, so yeah, man, I'm just saying that and sharing that with you, from everything from our liberation and freedom, and to making sure that a future generation wouldn't be captured under this. We've been using plants, psychoactives and all the rest of it, like for a long time. And going back to it being a current trend, and it's trending and a renaissance, as I said, we've been privy to this for millenniums now. Pre-slavery, pre-colonialism, this is what we've been doing. And during this period of time, it was part of our salvation as well. And post these experiences, it could be part of our salvation and liberation. And that's what, the journey that I share and take people on, just like not sweeping things under the rug, not bypassing things. Like let's have these conversations, let's have mature conversations about it, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of people in white coats that are looking into this now. But if you go to the Americas, you go to the Africas, you go to the Asias, you go to the indigenous places and spaces, you find out it's not a renaissance there. This is what they've been doing, this is what we've been doing, man. But we didn't try to monetize it or make extract and isolate and all of that type of stuff. We're like, no, man, this is just part of an exchange that nature has always provided with us. Just like the wind, the air, the sun, the rain, the mushrooms. This is all just part of, the data that nature provides. And we've been able to build relationships with them for, since the dawn of time. What I'm saying? It's the earliest people have been here. And that's what we do. And I feel like it's really important that if you're into psychedelics, if you're into mushrooms, if you're into ayahuasca, or into whatever you're into, you should know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You should want to go to the source and find out how this all started. And you find out that, even in Africa, they got their own version of ayahuasca. It's not just something that you find in Central and South America. And in fact, the ancient Egyptians and older groups have been using this for tens of thousands of years. And ironically, I found one of those trees here in Barbados, although it was brought here by one of the elders who brought these trees, seeds with him to Barbados. It's like, oh, you're doing the same thing that we had to do hundreds of years ago. It's like nature and history repeats itself, because that's all nature does. It just repeats itself. And if you leave nature alone long enough, she will repeat herself enough, or she will do a good job at taking things like that, recolonizing. Because nature's the first colonizer, mushrooms are the first colonizers, but they do an amazing job at colonizing. And some other folks didn't do such a great job, and that's why we're in the state that we're currently in, and they're isolating and doing all these clinical trials and all the rest of it, when you have people who are qualified through history and through experience that could share, like, this is how this stuff is and how it works. But I guess because they are where they are, they look how they look, we see them as primitive, backwards, mass mumbo jumbo stuff, and modern science doesn't support what they're saying. I'm like, fair enough then. That's where you see it then. I'll leave you where you're at.
Yeah, it's so well said. I'm hearing these patterns of liberation that our plant and fungi can be such allies with. And there's something around your educating and your drive to empower through growing our own, through really understanding the soil and the mycelium and bringing these beings into our lives more consciously, that I think is a huge piece of a more collective liberation of these colonial structures and patterns and the grind and all of it. So any closing words, hopes, visions, anything you want to call people into?
Yeah, man, just get in where you fit in. If this is for you, if I speak your language and you understand where I'm coming from, just support in any capacity that resonates with you, man. And if that is, liking, subscribing, coming to an event, supporting the cause in some shape, form or another, it's always going to be appreciated. But we're out here doing the work. So as I mentioned, like the work that we done in Barbados just now, of all the team being out here, that was all self-funded. There was no grants involved in that. That wasn't the community. That wasn't even the community coming out and saying, "Oh, well, not that I asked for it," because people say, "Oh, you could do a crowd fund or something like that," which I've never thought about in that regards. But it's just like, this is coming out. When people say, "Oh, you do all these workshops," you're always promoting your workshops, because I need to do these workshops so I can generate enough money so then we can do these types of works. It's not just so I can be on a beach scratching my ass and living the life. It's like, so the work will continue, because I know that there's not a lot of support that when it comes to this area, just like there's not a lot of support when it comes to young people and the work that I do. So we mentioned, me having this background with young people. I actually developed a curriculum. It's the first, because you mentioned, there's not even, it's nothing at uni. Well, we've got it in primary schools and secondary schools now. It's a good start. It's the first time in the world that a 5-year-old can go to school and study mycology. It's the first time that a 16-year-old who's been kicked out of school or doesn't know what their next steps may be, or might have done well at school but are not academically driven, who want to then explore mushrooms, we've got options for you now, because that didn't exist prior. So that we're nearly 5 years old since, the first 5-year-olds were doing the work. And now they're like 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And some of them were at the All Things Fungi Festival. We had the Grow Academy, the first mushroom academy that we know of in the world, curated by myself and the Grow team in Barnet at Totteridge Academy. So these are things that we're doing. And if you're like, your psychedelics in Africa, Darren, doesn't resonate. I'm not into all of that mumbo jumbo stuff. But I like the idea you're doing some stuff with kids, growing mushrooms and giving them, support that then. There's a lot going on that you can support in some shape, form or another. And that's my call. That's my, call to the community. And like, if you're a millionaire, or you got all this money you're looking for, where to put it. It doesn't have to come to me specifically, but it's like, as you mentioned, you said, fungi being the future. There's so many initiatives. There's so many things happening. And for me, it's just like, rather than it be these white coats that are doing what they do and going to do what they usually do, which I have no problem with, because I know that that's what they do. Mm-hmm. The question is, what do we do? What are we going to do? So that, I found my place in space. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if you've seen what I've been doing, I'm going to be doing more of that. And if you feel like you can help support in some capacity, come out, man. Give me a tap, give me a knock, send me an email, and we can create something. I look forward to it.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, do you have time just to share that really sweet anecdote of, was it your mum or your gran who was just like, nah, this isn't legit, nah, this is legit. And then finally you're in the main newspaper and then she's like, oh, well done. Like there was just this really sweet kind of, look.
Yeah, and it's been like that, man. As I said, like coming into this space, because remember, I was one of those people that thought mushrooms are druggies. What the mates I went to school with, like that's the narrative in my community, in my family, the people that I'm around. So it's not been easy in getting my family to co-sign what I'm into. Over now I've been doing it for like 20 years. Like, oh yeah, Darren's the mushroom guy, and like yeah, they're like more supportive, and some of them have stepped over and crossed over with me. But with that said, yeah, for me it was really important that the reason why I do this, I do mention as I do this, is because of my first experiences coming to Barbados 20 years ago. And I'm like, the reason that I'm doing this is because like my family, my grandmother, who then left Barbados to come to the UK and start this whole new voyage, that's why I've become a mushroom ambassador. She had to be brave and, make this journey into the unknown, at that time. And so for me to come full circle, to be coming back to Barbados, to be sitting with my family members who would consider this duppy umbrella and something negative, something not bad, to be like, you sure? You got to be careful with mushrooms. For me to hear those same conversations, but slowly but surely see them come around. And like you mentioned, yeah, man, I ended up being in the local paper, not even the national paper, because it's that's more as I was in the national paper. I've been on national TV, and it's like, oh, this is like, if these people are co-signing you and signing you up for radio and TV, it must be legit. So, we're getting some traction here, man. So for me, that's like my reference point is my family, my grandmother and other family members who were like, I don't know what this is all about, to, okay, yeah, man, we see it. Like, we're proud of you and like, keep doing the works. We wish you all the best. So that's all I need from my family. I don't need anybody outside. I don't need all the pats on the backs from all the strangers and stuff. I appreciate it. But like, I'm more like, let's get our hands on deck. That's what helped. That's, action speaks louder than words. So that's what I need. I've got my grandmother's love. I've got my mother's love. I've got my sister's love, my daughter's love. And they've co-signed, like, they used to think I was crazy. They now believe better or know better in some cases. And like, yeah, with that said, for me, that's like all I need. And I want to keep doing what I've got to do, man.
Dear listening one, in this fast-moving modern world, where the hum of industry and the pull of convenience can drown out the quieter truths, it's a humble act to pause, to listen, to connect. So thank you for being here with the Rooted Healing community. This podcast is a space where we weave together stories, reflections, and insights to nourish your wild, yearning soul. If this podcast has enriched your healing path, sparked your curiosity, or offered you solace, I invite you to reflect on what it means to keep such exchanges alive. Just as we tend the soil to ensure a garden can thrive, we can tend to the creative ecosystems we value. Becoming a patron is not simply about giving, it's about participating in a pattern of reciprocity, placing value in the things that matter and enrich your path. You'll receive exclusive content, giveaways, resources, meditations, workshops, and my deepest gratitude. Many of us no longer, or perhaps never did, buy newspapers. Yet the work that keeps us informed, inspired, and grounded still needs your care. With so many ideas, I would love to take this show the extra mile. But there is only so much unpaid time I can give to this project. By supporting this podcast, you're not just keeping it alive, you're honouring a commitment to heartful work in a world that so deeply needs our slowing down and remembering. It's a gesture of trust between us in the power of story, connection, and our shared vision. To those already supporting, thank you so much. You are part of this living web. And to those considering, I hope you step in when it feels right. Every contribution is a thread strengthening and enriching this work. And if money is too tight, please do show some love with rating, reviewing, sharing, and subscribing to help others find the show. The music in this episode is from Bonnie Medicine and Cynefin. If you'd like to gift your music to the show, please do reach out. Head to rootedhealing.org to explore our in-person ceremonial gatherings, online courses and workshops, all tending, healing and connecting our inner and outer landscapes. With gratitude, your host, Veronica Stanwell. Thanks for listening.